there's something that there's a news item that's gonna keep being on TV, but it's a kind of thing, rather laugh or cry, but it's an opportunity to talk about, like, people don't know, like, sort of the history of some parts of the history of our country that, like, it's actually untouchable topics, like in universities and stuff. I don't know why. In a free society, people would know this. It's a very important, like, shift in our history happened a while ago. But the sort of like the starting point for such a thing is, like, we all get ready for the holiday season. It's supposed to, like, there's this thing everyone's used to seeing of people who people who bum rush into stores, like, during the holiday season. They always show it. Like, people get a laugh at seeing people, like, stomp over each other. They get the. It's like sort of like sickly funny, but it happens every year. Crowds rushing in and, like, fights start over, like, the sales at holiday stores. It brings to mind something that it's a good time to talk about something like that. People, I'm saying, this is a forbidden topic in universities. Like, it's just not taught in universities. Like, I don't know why. It's a really important part of our history. The look of the people rushing this story, say, "Oh God, it looks like a herd of buffalo or something." It's really funny. It's a good. Here's the thing. I mean, it's too. Here's the thing. It's too. Why it's not obvious to people that, like, they're bum rushing in and, like, remember, people, like, work in these stores, like particularly, sell holiday things, like, it's, whether people care about this or not. There's something we could talk about the history of the country for a second. That, like, people are, like, sometimes people don't have a choice whether or not to work on the holidays, and the wages keep going down. A lot of people are people who don't have health care still, because we're, that kind of thing. But no, I mean, that you can find out. You can find out elsewhere. Here's the thing: the idea, it does look like a herd of people, like, charging in. I'm gonna tell you where if you haven't heard the term "the bewildered herd," there's something, like, about the history of our country. If people are that, let me put it this way, and right now with this holiday thing, I don't know. We don't know what the psychology of the people is, like, rushing in like that. Like, the idea of, like, saying, well, like, it's not that it should be. It's obvious to people that don't do that. Like, the people working at the stores, particularly Walmart, like, workers are treated terribly. Like, what must they be perceiving when that happens? I'm sure they don't think it's funny. But as far as that, that they're looking at that as a herd or whatever. If everyone's ever heard the term "the bewildered herd," that's actually a word that was coined by the that was actually coined by the liberal intellectuals during, like, the people don't know about the history. Like, we had the first time we ever had, like, a liberal intellectual political science professor became because it's really the history of, like, modern liberalism. Like, someone should know. The fact that it's not known in the universities, like, tells you his teaching. But the during when this Woodrow Wilson, he's a political science professor, like, became the president, and what was openly known at the time. This is, by the way, this is the time when it was openly said, like, the term propaganda wasn't a dirty word. The liberal intellectuals of the time, and you can read it, but this is the kind of thing that's banned from reading at the universities. At that time, like, liberal intellectuals and under Woodrow Wilson, and this is during the start of the public relations industry, the advertising industry. This is, like, when that started. We finally led to this, like, TV thing we have. Here's the thing: the thinking at the time, and they wrote it. It's in their literature that when, like, the liberal intellectuals of the time, were getting into power, the intellectuals said, okay, like, they didn't know if they could ramp up an entire population into, like, going to a war when it was an isolationist country. They did, but when they had gotten the entire country to participate in World War I, and had done it by just, like, working with the public relations industry and such, like, when that worked, the term bewildered herd entered into, like, the thought of and the writing of liberal intellectuals, and, like, why they felt that, like, this was that we can control the public mind, is what they thought. They're actually a bewildered herd, was the term, and, like, we have to do this, and we have to work with the public. Now that we know it works, you can ramp them up into war. We have like only a limited time to like seize the reins. The language was the men of brains must rule the day. The liberal intellectuals of the time, and they worked with the public relations industry and the advertising, who openly used the word propaganda. That's where when the term like bewildered herd was used. Because they realized at that point it wasn't always known until the country had been isolationist. Certainly during the Revolutionary War, it was when the Revolution happened that there wasn't a perception that like at some later date we'd be involved in these giant world conflicts. The country was supposed to be its own thing, but that's when they started using the term the bewildered herd, and they said, look, they realized that in totalitarian societies, like it's you don't have to worry too much about what people think and do, and like how you look at the population, like when you have a military over their head or something in a totalitarian country. But what they realized, like after the liberal intellectuals at the time realized that, like in a free society, it's if you can do it. If you can control the public mind, that right, because it's a free country, because it is a free country, you can't just tell them what to do. Okay, so they said it's one of the discoveries that in a really free country, you have to work extra hard to control people's attitudes, like their perceptions of themselves, how they perceive the world. That's actually, they realized, like a necessity. It's a necessity, like because they are a bewildered herd who don't know what's good for them, and the men of brains, the liberal intellectuals at the time, have to seize the day. That's when this thing started, where we all like now behave like it's a totalitarian society, and seeing irrational behavior, like a herd of people, bum rushing into stores and like stepping on each other's heads, like to get gifts. Like I don't know, like buy a gift for their family, like. You wonder if they tell their family, like, yeah, I stepped on someone's head to like get these presents. Like, I don't know, but why they're like that, why that happens, like why the public. You wonder what other societies think of that. That doesn't happen in like civilized countries. It just doesn't happen elsewhere. Some kind of like American phenomenon, but it's the outgrowth of having like an entire population of like sort of slobs who like the intellectual class and the media and the political class just keep constantly at them to sort of like control what they do. There's an outgrowth of that is like irrational behavior that indicates like a sort of like side result, like unintended, like, oh God, now they behave like this, and it's exited the literature in colleges, like. To read about that history. That's like one of the most important shifts. It's when the population like went under like control, that they don't think for themselves and stuff like that. Try to bring it up. Go to a university and like try to see if you can bring it up, or if it's taught or anything. It's not. There's a guy called Alex, I think his name is Alex Karras, who's Australian, published a bunch of that stuff. It doesn't enter into the universities. They're busy talking about other things. That's a good time to talk about that, when you see people bum rushing in and into stores where the workers are treated terribly. Some of them have to work on the holidays. It can't be with their families. Their wages keep going down, but they can't be with their families. And they're watching this herd of people rush in on them. Like that's actually kind of evil. By the way, during the same Woodrow Wilson period, right-wing intellectuals in Europe couldn't believe how badly American workers are treated. The right wing in Europe. So it's incredible how badly they treat the workers. Like, it's as though it's an uncivilized society. What they also knew, though, is that apparently, like, the intellectuals and this rising public relations industry have decided to work together to control their mind. When it worked to send them to war, like, then they would just keep at them. That's what the last 100 years have been. That's why people are like this now. They're just mindless. Like, that's our population, but that's part of our history, how they got like that. You should think about that when you see those like crowds of people rushing in.